Thank you, people. Проба, тест. Добре. So, first of all, I think all the smokers can be grateful for my appearance. Second of all, viral means not as in social media viral, more the traditional sense of the word that is virus related, even though that, as far as I know, it did well on the social media channels. So, next. Ooh, next. What? All right. So I'll spare you. I'll spare you the story of my life. Just a few facts, quick. Played games since the early '90s. Always wanted to make games. Good stuff. A little bit of classical animation. 8 years, approximately, in the movie industry. And freelancing, blah, blah, blah. Snapshot. There we go. The Mist. So you know what I'm talking about. So basically, this is our Mist. It's the alien virus that has been released by the melting of the permafrost. Excuse my voice, it's the beer. Next. So I will guide you to the process, how we came to this. Okay, thank you. First, limitations, gameplay, grid. Actually, it has to fit in a tile, so it's a volume. And also, we must be able to hide creatures inside it. And this is one of the early prototypes. Yes. Also, we have first-person, third-person camera shooting around, so it has to visually hide everything that is inside it up to a certain distance. Basically like a depth fog, but in a volume. Next. Early prototypes. How we went about it. It had to fit in the world, it had to tile well, so it made sense to be world mapped, and also there is flowing effect, which I'll show you later. Next. Secondly, we went on to try some other stuff. That is Raymarchingen sign distance fields, which is very heavily mathematical, and in the limited time we had for research, couldn't make it work in our case for performance issues. Performance reasons, yes. Next. Even though we had some psychedelic results with it. Next. Even more psychedelic results. Totally real time. Next. That was probably our goal, or somewhat closer to what we wanted to achieve. Next. And since we didn't have time, it was almost released and we had to ship with something, we fall back on the previous idea. So that's basically the shader that is making this effect. How many of you are familiar with shaders? There's people, that's nice. Okay, I'll try not to make it too technical or too boring, so. Anyways, it's world mapping. By the time we used Shader Forge, which was deprecated, so we moved on to Amplify Shader, artist-friendly solution, and I had to deconstruct their triplanar mapping node, so I can map it to world coordinates, which I wanted to distort, blend, and manipulate in a couple of other ways. So basically, triplanar mapping, how it works. You don't use UV, you use the world space, and you blend between projection planes, which are top, side, and front. So you get this effect. There's the displacement based on the same texture. And also you travel through space. And there is also the flow mapping. So basically, we have a noise texture, and we have that sort of a strange texture that kind of looks like a normal map if you put blue into the channel. And also on the bottom, it's not very clear, the visualization, but it's actually a vector map that distorts the image. And it also blends in phases. So you have two phases of the image, and it blends constantly between them, and you get this swirling motion that is loopable. And that's on the GPU. And next, if you've seen this kind of stuff on the internet, that's how most of it is made. And on the bottom right corner, you can see a bad case of blending. So yeah, here's the flow mapping in progress. Also, because it's a mist, it has to be transparent. We use like 4 different types of blending. That blending is based on the Z channel. It's relative to the objects behind it. Camera distance is like a clipping plane, but a soft one. So when you get inside it, there's a certain distance that you see. There's also the Fresnel effect, which removes the hard edges around it, and texture values, so a little bit more variation. And without these techniques, there are a couple of... these were like the first results. You can scroll to them, through them. Next. There are like 5, I think. Basically using just a texture noise and a flow map. That's all that goes to it. So that's one of the first results that was like almost finished. At this point, we had like we wanted to make the mist to stand out. It's an alien mist. We also have something. We already have something that is kind of looking that way, but does it fit into our world? So, with a little bit more iteration, we decided to go with this one. So, pardon me about the clipping, it's GIF, but the idea is that there are microbes in it, and it's sentient, and it flows with life and electricity a little bit as well. And also it's a lot more easier to notice in gameplay. So this is the same stuff in different lighting scenario, different map, amazing industrial environment. Inside joke. Anyways, this is when you're inside of the mist. There's an enemy standing 3 tiles away from us, and we see its silhouette, readable enough. It has to be a horror game, even though sometimes we forget. So, trying to keep the horror in horror. Next. And this is daylight situation, scavenging maps, and there's a mist. Oh, yeah. Next. And other results. So there were other things. So basically, using the same techniques, different input, fire effect. Totally same shader. Next. A lot of fire, more fire. Even more fire. And lastly, that's the goo. It's Basically, the three elements use the same system. They're volumetric, occupied tile. It's like rock, paper, scissors. Goo trumps fire. Fire burns mist. Mist feed on the goo. They interact with each other. It's beautiful. That's it. Thank you.
So, any questions?
So you used Amplify Shader Editor for making this, and after you concepted it in that, did a shader programmer actually translate it to a more optimized code, or are you using the actual output of Amplify?
Currently, we're using the Amplify output. We're still figuring out specs for Xbox One, which is our target platform, and probably optimize it a little bit later, iteration, one more, depending on how much resource we have.
Okay, thanks.
It's currently behaving well.
That was impressive. How heavy is exactly this shader compared to, say, standard Unity shader? And would it run on mobiles?
Huh. Well, really depends. I haven't been testing it on mobile because we don't port our game to mobile. On 1060, GTX 1060, it takes about 0.006 milliseconds to render a single piece of it. We usually have like 400 volumes, each separate object stacking onto each other. That's what I forgot to mention, probably.
Right. Another thing. Why didn't you go with the obvious solution to use particles?
It would have been probably harder. Anyway, how much particles do you have to emit to like create a volume and like?
At least 400.
Yeah, probably. Well, easier to control this way.
Any more questions?
Thanks for the presentation. What kind of major problems have you faced using Unity?
Ooh. I won't drop the mic. Quite a lot, basically. But some of these are internal. I would not say that Unity per se is a bad platform to work on. Difficulties a lot, but that's like a whole nother talk. If you want, we can talk later. It's depressing. Joking, it's fun.
Okay, so this obviously makes me ask you this question: would it be easier to develop this shader in Unreal?
Same. Anybody else? I promise not to waste time.
Okay, if there is no more questions, thank you so much, Kamen.
Thanks.